Okay, so the linear or goal-directed thought process is a true marvel of human design, if you really think about it. Because when we say constellation of symptoms, what are we talking about? Okay, I think of a constellation, and here I have drawn out the Little Dipper. Okay, and then the reason for that is because the first star in the in the Little Dipper is the North Star, which is the formal name was Polaris, also a really cool X-Men character. Okay, but the reason I say that is because if you look at Polaris, Polaris will also be in the same place, right? And then the rest of these stars may rotate around Polaris. But the reason this is powerful is because question writers like to clue you in on the most well-known aspect of a certain disease, for the most part. But what you can do then is you can try to connect the dots that they give you, right? And then draw out what it is that's going on here. And so the reason this is so important is it's not just like the simple idea of it is when you apply it to like a disease like Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome, and this is the constellation of symptoms you see. But what's really, really powerful is when you understand that, okay, here is a sentence, okay? And then you understand that, okay, in order to create a sentence, I need to have a linear thought process. Okay, I'm going to start off with this word, I'm going to end with this word. But even in this word, right, like the letters H, E, R, E, right, I need to have a linear thought process in order to create this. And then even within the letter H, right, I need to think about, I'm going to draw this line, this. But what's super, super interesting is now if you turn it a little bit, this is H is now an I. Okay, but, right, it's besides the point. But I want to understand, like, okay, how do we, this is a linear thought process, and the true power of a linear thought process is not just, again, like understanding the constellation of symptoms, but understanding that question writers, in order to create a question, you need to literally write out words, right? And this constellation of words, this constellation of symptoms has to come out in a certain sentence format. And the way that question writers usually go after these concepts is repetitive and patterns, because that's the way they present in real life and real people, right? That's the way we can understand diseases. So that's why we know a VIPoma or WDHA syndrome has watery diarrhea, hypokalemia, agorrhea. That's the constellation of symptoms we see in a VIPoma. In schizophrenia, right, if you have the time factor, delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, thought, behavior, right, and negative symptoms, right? So these are the constellation of symptoms, and then these can look, right, this is a dot, this is each one of these is a point, right? And then, okay, what does that actually look like, right? And then you can do, so Raynaud's pentad or Charcot's triad, like those are, there's 3 points and then trying to connect them, or there's 5 points and trying to connect them. Here there's 4 points and you're trying to connect them. So that's the linear thought process is not only what underlies all of the questions, but it's also the goal, right, of what we're trying to do when we read a question or when we try to get after, or we try to answer a question, because you want to see these points in space and then be able to connect them and make sense of what it is that you see. Because really, if you think about a constellation, it's just a number of stars in an endless abyss of stars in space, right? So when we look at it, right, we have to make sense of what it is that we're looking at. It's not just deciding that this is 1, 2, 3, but starting off with Polaris, right? Understanding, okay, if we go to this star and this star and this star, we can create this constellation, and that clues us into what it is that we're actually looking at.